Is the Miami Hurricanes offense going to be ready and in sync by the time they face the Gators on August 31st?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, writer for allhurricanes.com and co-host of Locked On ACC. And thank you to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. On this episode, we will discuss where the Miami Hurricanes are objectively better on the field than the Florida Gators and whether those areas will translate into success come the opener on August 31st. We have a lot of recruiting names to talk about. The recruiting overlord is going to join us here in just a second. But I also want to talk to what Miami's offensive coordinator said after Tuesday's practice and why I think people are blowing it way out of proportion. But we have the man, the myth, the legend with us, the recruiting overlord in these parts on the Locked On Network, Brian Smith. So Brian, Shannon Dawson spoke to the media on Tuesday, and he said of the offense and the consistency, we're making a few plays go backwards. It's not anywhere close to where it needs to be. Our communication from play to play, the urgency we need to be way more consistent than what we're doing some good things, but it's too up and down, he said. We have to clean up the stuff that kills drives, but fifth practice too, right? He said, and that's where I sit, Brian. It's like, I know, like I've already seen like Florida State aggregators like, oh, Miami's OC, they say that the offense is lost. First of all, the word lost was not even used in the quote. And second of all, Brian, I would actually be, and I'm not saying like I loved what Shannon Dawson had to say, and I'm not saying it's a great sign that there's inconsistencies, but I'd rather him say what he said than after 5 practices come out and say, oh, everything's great, because then I'd feel like he's a liar.
Well, the dichotomy of college football is the same every year. Offense will take a little longer than defense because it's more about chemistry, especially with your offensive line. You also have a transfer quarterback. You've got Sam out there at wide receiver. He's a guy who's going to play a lot. You got Damian Martinez as a trainer. There's going to be some things. And then you got Elijah, who's finally going to get a play tight. There's a lot of parts moving around here. I'm not surprised they're not exactly where they need to be, especially in fall camp. They're not going to say this. They're trying to shuffle in a lot of guys to keep the starters from playing a lot of reps in fall camp. The guys they know they're going to start. They don't, they don't want to make anybody mad, but that's a big part of this. So you got guys that aren't always going to be playing together causing this. And this is every program. This is not a Miami situation. It is from Boston College to USC, from Texas to Northwestern, across the country. Offenses struggle in fall camp. You work out the kinks and you put in your rotation to get guys reps. It is what it is. I agree with Dawson. That's unfortunate. But did you really think he was going to say anything else? When was a team that you've ever heard at any level right out the gate? They're just killing it on offense in fall camp. Name one. It doesn't work that way. Football is hard. So, yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of people trying to get clickbait comments out there on Twitter and whatever else. But I know better.
Well, and listen, part of it, I don't mind some offensive growing pains, especially considering what the defense added even since spring football. Because Brian, I was at every spring football practice, and I actually thought like the offense overall beat the defense during the spring. Like they won more practices than the defense won.
That's impressive.
But then the defense, since that point, the defense has gotten certain defensive backs healthy who weren't healthy during spring football. You go out and add in the transfer portal 2 of your better defensive linemen now. Tyler Barron on the edge, who was, really good in the SEC for the past few years. You go add Simeon Barrow. Simeon Barrow, by the way, is practicing really well. I base that not only on what I've seen, but also what I've been told from people who are able to watch more than just the media viewings of practices. So you add some like and Jalen Alderman at linebacker. Kiko Mauigoa is healthy now. He wasn't practicing in the spring. So the defense got some reinforcements, Brian. And like you said, defense is usually ahead of the offense this time of year. And also, if in the spring with the offense doing so well, some people were worried about the defense. Now that the defense is doing really well, people are starting to worry about the offense. I'm just glad that two really strong units get to practice against each other every day.
Making each other better in practice is something a lot of the old-time Miami players, Irvin and Russell Maryland, different guys have talked about over the years. You need to get better during the week. And oftentimes, you're playing against far better competition on your own campus for the University of Miami than you will be on a Saturday. Except for 2 or 3 teams, there aren't many teams on UM's schedule that has similar talent. So you're right. Absolutely, Alex. The other part of that is somebody has to win and somebody has to lose on every rep. There is no way you can both win at the same time. It's not how it works. So I don't care as long as it's a balanced, competitive thing and there's learning going on. Everybody wants to complain. That's the nature of fan. It's, by the way, short for fanatic.
Yeah. So how do you think you mentioned adding Sam Brown and I know he looks really good in person, Brian. I'd watched a little bit of the Houston film obviously, but he looks every bit of, I think he's listed at 6'2". He looks every bit of that. He's also very fast. It seems like Miami's going to have a decision to make for the third starting wide receiver. We assume that obviously Xavier Restrepo is rock solid for one spot in the slot. Jacoby George is, I think, solid for another starting spot. And then maybe it's going to come down between Isaiah Horton, who not only have my eyes told me he's doing really well, but everyone who talks about Horton is like, this guy's made a jump. Like he's made a huge jump from last year. But then Sam Brown also comes in and he's looking really good. And he has a really good resume, over 800 receiving yards last year at Houston. How do you think that might shake out in terms of finding your top 3?
I think Cam Ward will have a lot to do with that. Whichever player he's more comfortable with, I'm sure that he'll speak with everybody on UM staff, but especially, the coordinator, the receivers coach. Let's figure this out. Worst case is they rotate them. I don't know how you judge who starts. Maybe it's how they play during the week, but it sounds like it's a close competition, and that's not a bad thing. Last year, when Colby wasn't on the field, Isaiah had some moments, but he wasn't consistent towards the back end. He wasn't. I'm curious how much of a jump he's made in games. I always say, practice is great. You still got to see it in games. Browns, I know it's Houston, but that guy had some pretty productive times. Obviously, a certain coordinator at Miami knows him because he was at Houston prior. So I'm curious how they're going to do that because he's worked with both guys now. So that's a great question. I would think they'll both play a lot. And maybe after the first couple games, whoever's just proven it gets the nod.
You talk to Dawson occasionally. Do you get the sense that it's going to be probably like a close to a 50-50 split of run to pass? Is it strictly going to be game to game, or with the personnel Miami has up front, maybe you have to run 55-60% of the time? How do you think that's going to shake out?
Well, a little bit of it is what you're going against. Are they putting 7 in the box? Because for people that haven't seen, Damian Martinez is not a fun guy to tackle.
No.
He's tremendous which it's Miami. He's tremendous between the tackles. I would imagine they'll be run first until teams make them not be. But if somebody just says, you know what, we're putting 8 up here, we're going man on your 3, like, okay, because Miami has guys that can, like Jacoby can run by about anybody. So, and we've all seen what Restrepo can do after last year. He had an incredible year. He's very difficult. They're going to have a poison to pick, and I think Dawson will bounce back and forth. I don't think he's a real heavy pass guy, a real heavy run guy. He's a real heavy, this is my best player guy. That first year he was at West Virginia, they set all kinds of records, but he had a bunch of guys that were NFL talent. And he took advantage of it. Amen. That's what you should do. That unit isn't a whole lot different than this one in terms of the experience. I don't know if they have as much speed, but it's really fast. You got a veteran quarterback that's fifth-year senior. So if somebody wants to put a bunch of guys in the box and play man, okay. There could be a couple games where Ward throws for 350, and it's not even going to look difficult because I don't think many teams can handle Miami outside with one-on-one coverage.
We got the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, with us, who's also my colleague at allhurricanes.com. Make sure you're checking out that website, allhurricanes.com. We are going to talk recruiting later on in this episode, as you've got important players like 5-star wide receiver Jaime Ffrench, 4-star defensive back Bryce Fitzgerald, who are announcing verbal decisions later on this month. Someone like Ben Hanks may not be too far away from announcing. We don't have a solid date for him yet. Everyone wants to know about 5-star defensive lineman Iose Epenesa, where Miami stands with him. But when we come back, I want to get Brian's take, and I'll weigh in as well, because we got this question about where on the field are the Hurricanes objectively better than the Florida Gators, and will that translate to a win later on this month? My friends, you know what you want to do? We're only getting started. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And I already know you're keeping it locked to Game Time because, guys, you're getting the best deals on tickets right up until the last minute. I keep getting these notifications because I haven't bought my tickets yet for the game in Gainesville, but the prices keep going down. As we're a little over 3 weeks away, they're going to keep going down. I want to make sure I get my seats above the visitor sideline, but I love getting tickets on Game Time because the prices go down the closer you get to the event. Guys, whether it's an upcoming college football game, a Major League Baseball game you want to go to, a concert you want to go to, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more at Game Time. The flash deals let you save even more right there in the app on select seats ahead of the game or the event. You can get an all-in price, which gives you the fees, well, all the total up front with no surprise hidden fees at checkout, I should say. You can get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. So, folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. I co-host that show with Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. We take you around the conference, whether it be football previews, courtroom drama, conference realignment. We have all of that and more on Locked On ACC. Make that your second listen, available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right, so we have the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, with us, who's brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. All right, Brian, we get a question from X that asks us, hey, what position group, we can maybe give more than one group, I hope, Brian, but what position group can we objectively say that we are, he flipped this around. Okay, what position group can we objectively say that we are not better than versus Florida? So he actually went negative, not positive. So let's start with that, Brian. Is there any part of the field you can say Florida has Miami's number there?
The one I'm concerned about is wide receiver for Florida. They've got the speedy receiver coming back. That was the freshman. He can fly. He's a kid I saw a lot in high school. And then they got Elijah Badger transferred over from Arizona State, who's good.
He's good.
He's really good. When you got two weapons like that, and they got other players too. I'm not saying Florida's void of talent at receiver, but when you've got two guys like that and they have a lot of speed in general, I worry about big plays. And that was the one thing that's plagued Miami for the last couple of years, and they lost some guys. So first game of the year, there's no buffer. You know they're going to take shots. Florida's a run-first team, although for those that don't know, their running back's probably not going to play against Miami. I don't root for any kid to get hurt, but he had like a minor knee surgery. Probably isn't going to be ready for UM, and even if he could play, his conditioning is going to be trash because he's not able to run pretty much the whole month of August. So good luck to that. But they're going to try to run play action, go deep. That is my concern. We talked about this off the air the other day, like Powell and these guys. Who's going to line up where? How are they going to do things against nickel, dime situations? There's a lot of questions. Damari might be a first-year starter. Zaquan Patterson might play a lot. He's a freshman. There's a lot of pressure to go up against a speedy receiver group like that. That is my concern.
What about areas where you think Miami has definitive advantages, Brian? I think it's fair to say running back, right? Especially, and probably even if Montrell Johnson was for sure going to play, I would still give Miami the edge. But now that he's not, I think Miami's got a huge advantage there, from Damian Martinez to Mark Fletcher, who I think can play in that game. I'm seeing positive signs he's going to be ready for the opener. Chris Johnson, who's practicing very well. Jordan Lyle, who's practicing really well, Brian. I always want to bring him up. And Chris Wheatley-Humphrey is doing a fine job. And A.J. Allen is back. So Miami, you're going to have, during certain games, you're going to have probably some disappointed running backs that aren't getting into games, because I don't know how you rotate 6 guys. That's a lot.
That's something that Mario Cristobal and his staff are going to figure out. They make a lot of money to make those decisions.
Yeah.
It's not easy. But at the same time, I think the biggest advantage is the fact that Princely Umanella is transferring to Ole Miss. He had 11 and a half tackles for loss and 7 sacks last year. By far their best edge guy. And we all know if you give Cam Ward time, you're in trouble. And that also is a guy that can create problems in the run game. They're losing him as well. They got big guys up front, but they're just not that productive. Shamar James should be healthy this year, the linebacker for the Gators. He's really good. But Miami's O-line against their D-line, I think, I don't want to say complete mismatch, but with Martinez, who's proven at running back, even if Mark doesn't play, don't you think that's a 120 to 140 kind of rushing game for the Canes with the running back position? Now, Ward doesn't run a ton, but he'll have 20, 30 yards. I just don't think that Florida will do well to keep Miami out of manageable. I know this is a common term, manageable third downs. You'll see a lot of 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2. There aren't many good play calls for a defense coordinator there against the mobile quarterback in Miami's receiving corps. So I think Miami up front has an edge because I don't believe there's a true, okay, we got a scheme for this guy up front for UF that's a dominant pass rush guy or disruptor. There could be. I mean, they've had other guys recruited that were pretty high, but they haven't shown it yet. That's my number one. Number 2, I also think that Miami in general, just athletically, they're even better than Florida. They just got more talent and depth, and I think fourth quarter that'll work. That's, it's a generality, but Miami has more depth than UF.
Let's talk about the quarterback matchup. Now, I'm not saying I would take Graham Mertz over Cam Ward, because I wouldn't, but I do think Miami fans are probably sleeping on Mertz a little bit too much, Brian. He is very experienced. I think he's better than a lot of Miami fans realize he is.
Sure.
If you think we're just going to completely, stifle this guy, sack him 30 times and take him out of his game. But how much of an advantage do you think Miami has on that position? And is there anything part of Graham Mertz's game that people should not sleep on?
Accuracy is number 1. 72.9%, regardless of offensive scheme. Pretty good.
Yeah.
They threw short a lot last year, and I understand that. But at the same time, he doesn't put him in harm's way. They were a run first. We're not going to throw it down the field team. And defense has played up, especially during the back half of the season. He only had 3 picks. The one difference between him and Cam Ward is he doesn't put the football in harm's way. I know we've talked about this before. Cam put the ball in a bad spot 14 times last year for Washington. He fumbles a lot. That cannot happen against the Gators. Yeah. But otherwise, I just don't think Graham, the way he played last year, unless something's really changed, he just doesn't take many chances. And against a front 7 like Miami, do we really think they're going to have 3-4 drives of 60, 70, 80 yards? So if they don't get turnovers, it may not matter because he would have to come outside his normal comfort zone. They got to hit some 40 and 50-yard plays against Miami to score. Prove me wrong.
Yeah.
He's accurate, but, 2nd down and 5, Florida makes a lot of mental errors anyway, penalties and stupid things. I think their drives will stall. If they don't have something different with Mertz, they're in trouble.
Well, we got to talk about some of Miami's most important recruiting targets, because we do have some decisions coming up later on in the month of August, especially when it comes to a stud receiver like Jaime Ffrench, who's going to be announcing the day before that Miami versus Florida game. In less than 2 weeks, Ben Hanks is announcing between Miami and he's not announcing till later. It's Bryce Fitzgerald who's going to be announcing later on this month. Hanks, who knows when Ben Hanks will announce? You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Guys, also make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin, who does a fantastic job not only hosting Locked On Oregon Ducks, but hosting the national show on this channel, Locked On College Football, takes you all around. I've been a guest on his show frequently. My pal Kenton from Locked On ACC has been a guest on his show frequently. With college football right around the corner, Spencer McLaughlin has you ready. Locked On College Football, available free wherever you get your podcasts. We have the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, on with us. Now, we were talking a little off air, Brian, and you told me that out of the names we're going to talk about today, that Jaime Ffrench probably has the most interesting or compelling recruitment right now, as we are, just a few weeks away, a little over 3 weeks away from Jaime Ffrench's verbal commitment. And, there have been new trending leaders throughout the process. I feel pretty good about the work Miami is putting into his recruitment. Not saying I expect him necessarily to pick Miami, but I know Miami's right up there. What are you hearing about Jaime Ffrench?
That's twofold. Number one, usually by this point with an elite kid, myself or one of the other guys in the recruiting industry has gotten some kind of scoop that is like, okay, this young man's picking school X. I haven't gotten one text. I haven't heard one rumor. And at this point, it's just really late in the game for somebody not to, and maybe somebody hasn't shared it with me, but we all talk in some capacity. I haven't gotten that. Number two, he didn't just visit Miami. He visited LSU and Miami for that late July thing. Both schools are up there, but people still think Texas. It is all over the map. And I've known Jaime since he was in 8th grade. Like, everybody knew he was going to be a dude. Nobody knows where he's going. I'm fascinated with it because Miami, I thought they were crazy a few months ago. Like, they're just going all in on him and Dallas Wilson, and they were just really, really trying. But now they might have been right because they're, like you said, I'm not sure that he will pick Miami, but they're right there. He wouldn't have visited for the event at the end of July. He would not if he wasn't interested. Jaime could have went anywhere else he wanted to. He chose to go Miami. What's that tell you? Yeah. So the Canes went from a team that was probably 3rd, 4th, or 5th to like right there towards the top. Yeah. That would change your program. Like, he is a difference maker at receiver. Very shifty and has incredible body control. We'll see what he does, but I haven't heard a definitive answer yet. I'm just really, really curious.
Yeah, it does sound compelling. Bryce Fitzgerald is another one who came down to Miami for that barbecue 4-star defensive back out of Miami Columbus. It really seemed like Miami gave him something to think about. Now, up until, I don't know, a few weeks ago, I didn't really feel a whole lot of positive trends with Bryce to the Hurricanes. I'm starting to feel more positivity now, but is it too little too late, Brian? Where do you think Fitzgerald is trending as he's a little over a week away from announcing?
I haven't heard anything other than that Miami's putting in a full court press, but maybe that has something to do with him being the Columbus kid. I've talked about that before. For those who don't know, Mario went to school there, so did his buddy Alex Mirabal. I think that Miami is a team that everybody kind of slept on. Florida State had some momentum there at one point. Like, everybody likes it. He's a great kid, very versatile. I understand why everybody's recruiting him. But it's the big three, Florida State, Miami. I haven't heard anything else. Like, if I had to pick, I would pick Miami. I would have heard something else on one of the other schools. I have other people that really dislike Miami that would have told me something. They didn't think he was going to UM. I haven't heard anything from Florida State in the last week or so. I find that interesting. Yeah. Nothing on the Florida State side. Like, they love getting kids out of Miami's backyard.
Yes, they do.
And I get it. I haven't heard anything on that. So I like UM. Maybe I'm wrong, but I like UM.
Now, the Gators are trying to get a player out of Miami's backyard, but his father played at Florida. That's Ben Hanks Jr. I don't know. I keep feeling as if not for who his dad is, that Miami would be far and away the leaders in 100%. His recruitment. But since, his father played there and he had a great official visit, did Ben Hanks Jr. to Miami last month. Florida has kind of been perceived to be the favorite there, with Miami just never going away. That's you'll hear that a lot about Mario Cristobal as a recruiter. He just never goes away. How do you think this is going to play out with Ben Hanks Jr.?
I've heard two totally different things. One said UF feels really, really good about this. And then I got one at Miami. Watch out for my polar opposite. Two people I really, really trust. That's very rare.
Yeah.
But like you, Dad being a UF guy, the only thing I could think of is Dad is concerned that the coaches aren't going to be at UF, which brings me to the following point. Why would you even make any decision before October to kind of see what happens with Napier? If the Gators are truly, that's how I would look at it.
Yeah.
If he's announcing now, I don't see why you would pick Florida. if he announces for this college football season, I think it would be Miami, unless he's just going to Florida no matter what. But then why wouldn't he have already committed months ago? Because he's been to UF 100 times. Your dad's Ben Hanks. So for those who don't know, his dad was a really good linebacker for the Gators in the 90s. He was a very good football player. But again, the timeline is very interesting. People talking about decisions coming and all this. Okay, I like Miami if it's reformed, just looking at it logically. But again, the two sides that I've heard are polar opposite answers, so I'm a little confused.
So when I asked our Locked On Canes Insiders chat who they wanted me to ask you about, a name that kept coming up, but I don't know if there's anything new on this player, but that's 5-star defensive lineman Iose Epenesa. There's been some Miami buzz in recent months, but this is like, if you run like an X search or a Google search on Jaime Ffrench, you're going to find something new pretty much every day. You run a Google search on Iose Epenesa, it's very quiet from his camp. There's not a whole lot of new stuff there. Have you heard anything new on Epenesa?
I have not. That kid is pretty isolated with where he lives, so he's not going to have guys like me just strolling through practice. Like if he played at Miami Northwestern, he's going to, it's just a different answer.
People would be going through his garbage to see who sent him mail.
100%.
Yeah.
It's crazy in South Florida. But in all honesty, that is the silence of the lambs right there, my friend. There's nothing going on, at least publicly. I don't even know what his decision timeline is. This kid has kept it close to the vest for a long time, but it's gotten to the point where it's like, I'm hoping for him and for us that he announces soon just so it's over, because nobody knows.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time and knowledge as always. You guys want to make sure not only should you follow Brian on X at FBScout_Florida, check him out all over the Locked On Podcast Network because he's the recruiting expert in these parts. And also check him out at the website where we both work, allhurricanes.com, and Brian works overtime at allhurricanes.com. So make sure you're checking it out. Brian, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And I would encourage everyone to support the show. If you enjoy Locked On Canes, hit that thumbs up button. Oh, my thumb was fading out like Marty McFly. Hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to Locked On Canes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.